Good day, my Telos podcast friends. This is the Telos podcast by Telos Writer. This podcast is funded by Telos Worker Proposals, which is an epic thing about Telos is they make things happen like this with interesting governance. This Telos podcast is also sponsored by Spores, an audio, haptic, and kinetic puzzle box built by Hybrid.Games. Using sound, touch, and your phone's physical motions, you'll learn how to unlock and collect unique digital items on the EOS blockchain. Visit Hybrid.Games to learn more. That is our epic sound engineer, Scott, who's making Hybrid.Games happen. Today, we have a really killer show for you guys. It's Rieki. He's from Seeds, which Seeds is a project that's launching on Telos. They're doing a regenerative society. So basically, Seeds is focused on building out a decentralized monetary policy and governance system that can empower an alternative to government-backed currencies. So this is just a rad podcast. Like always, we get into some philosophy. What's cool about Seeds is they are reapproaching UBI and these governance systems from really interesting angles. So enjoy the podcast and enjoy listening to Rieki. Cheers.
You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain.
The Telos Podcast.
You stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Rieki, welcome to the Telos Podcast. Great to have you here.
Lovely to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think is the most interesting thing going on in Telos right now?
So Telos as a whole, or just what's happening in the current news at the moment?
You know, I like talking about Telos as a whole, generally. I like this bigger picture stuff because there's a lot going on behind the thoughts and emotions of this whole blockchain thing. So yeah, what's your take on Telos as a whole?
So I love Telos as a whole because it's EOSIO with an ethical bias and a governance focus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
absolutely.
it makes it,
and so, I mean, that's kind of a pretty simple transition into to Seeds right there. I mean, it's a ethical bias and a governance focus, and that's obviously why you chose Telos, which is rad. What specifically about Telos governance, and how does that kind of relate to Seeds? And why'd you choose the Telos blockchain?
Sure. So Seeds wanted to do a financial system that was governed by people and that also gave recourse for fraud or mistakes being a big one. I mean, if we're going to get mass adoption of an alternative financial system, we needed a way to be able to make mistakes and recover from them fairly easily. So Telos is really focused on actually bringing in governance layers and arbitration and taking care of the arbitration court and all of that amazing stuff that Telos is taking on. So it was really necessary for Seeds. I mean, our roadmap was a lot longer and we felt like we had to do all of that ourselves. But most of what we thought we needed to develop, Telos has already been developing, at least on the governance front. So that's really awesome working with the core team there and using some of the tools they've already built. And we're building a lot of our own on top of them, which we can get into later. And I think that'll be really beautiful additions to the Telos community, what we're adding there. Anyway.
Yeah, the governance is so cool because I think about the governance and like as humans we've governed ourselves for thousands of years and we've kind of figured out all these ways to make it work. And then when we came in and we're trying to add blockchain to that now, there's a lot of this like code is law, like this black and white thinking where it's like, okay, we have to put it all into the code, figure it all out on the front end, like kick the humans out because they're stupid. And but governance is, it works to some extent. We've been using it and doing it as humans. It's part of our nature. So to like find a way to integrate them, like to use this gray area is cool. I appreciate that they're doing that. So yeah, for sure. So what is Seeds? I mean, let's tell people what it is.
Sure. So Seeds is, by definition, sowing economically and ecologically decentralized societies.
Oh, cool.
So what we're trying to do is design what we call a minimal viable society. So it's all the necessary tools required for people to spin up and create new societies. So financial layers, governance layers, organization layers, all kind of packaged into one nice, easy to use UI that's essentially a fun way for someone to be able to step into and engage in a completely different way of organizing and focusing human will and action. So our first bias is towards creating what we call a regenerative culture, because we feel like most of the massive crises facing humanity right now are based on us destroying our ecosystems and inequality and lack of voice in our governance systems and several other. But we've packaged those all together and said, okay, well, let's try to create solutions to all of these at once, because our problems are systemic solutions. So it's going to require a systemic approach. So that's what Seeds is about. It's about being able to package up tools to be able to collectively address all of those problems at once.
That's such a huge thought. I mean, you talk about these systemic, right now we're having kind of almost systemic failures, like in a lot of areas, the wealth distribution. This is off your website, by the way. The 26th richest people in the world own as much wealth as the bottom 50% in 2019, and that's increasing. 1 million species are at the risk of extinction 2019. And then a few years ago, we put 5.2 trillion into subsidizing fossil fuels, which is taking us the wrong way as far as, the environment goes. It's like we're almost like at this singularity of just like messing up the beautiful earth we live in, and it's like, so yeah, it's systemic is the point there. Just reiterating what you're saying. So what's an example, like what's kind of an example of how you see this Seeds token playing out? And then we'll kind of get into more of the technical stuff, but like how would it work like in someone's daily life?
Sure. So I would imagine for the vast majority of people who end up adopting Seeds, they might not necessarily even know they're using cryptocurrency. I mean, you went through the same process of using Seeds as you did to load your PayPal balance. Somehow you had to take your US dollars and put it into some other account somewhere else, and then you're able to access that account to make purchases with. And PayPal was able to get millions and hundreds of millions of people using it. It was a fairly straightforward process. And I think crypto is at that point today where it's fairly easy to onboard. And that's what we're building into Seeds. So making it no more difficult to join Seeds as it was to join PayPal.
Nice. And so Seeds is a currency. I mean, a spendable currency is kind of at the core of what it is. Is it a stable coin as well, or what's that look like?
Well, we call it a better than stable coin, but whenever anyone says stable coin, you got to say stable to what? Mm-hmm. So stable coins are stable to the US dollar, where US dollars are losing their purchasing power about 10 to 14% year over year. Official sources say it's around like 3 to 5, but there's been tons of third party look into this, and it's hearing it more about 10 to 14%. But either way, so if you're stabilizing your token to the US dollar, it's really depreciating at 10 to 14%. You can stabilize it to a basket of goods, but then what are this basket of goods, So what we're doing with Seeds is we're actually just growing our supply to meet changes in demand and to replace burn tokens, etc. But the whole real idea is that we're creating more currency just to meet changes in demand so that the price of it remains more stable.
Okay.
This is intrinsically stable. So we're tracking our own internal supply and demand and then growing currency to meet that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so if there were a decrease in demand, are you also burning tokens on the other end, or how's that look?
Yeah. So we're burning tokens through a wide variety of tools that we're going to be offering people, such as promoting on the platform. If you want to promote your content or if you want to promote your business, we have areas to do that, kind of like an app store. And you're burning tokens for that service. When you're proposing ideas, when you're putting up proposals, you burn tokens to do that. When you're using some of the banking contracts we could talk about later, you're burning tokens to use those. When you're doing insurance contracts, you burn through that, etc. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of things on the platform that are offering what we call zero marginal cost services. It's a service that we can essentially code into the base layer that users are going to be able to access. Instead of paying someone for this service, you're just burning tokens to use this service. So as our economy grows and our society grows and there's more people on the platform, these services become much more valuable and more used. So we're burning much more tokens on the back end when growth slows. So in the beginning, we're just creating more tokens as growth is rapid and fast. But when growth slows, we're burning more tokens. And that both fuels what we call the harvest. That's that process of creating new tokens.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And that sounds like with some parts of like the Steam token, how they controlled basically the inflation rate to kind of make the Steam backed dollar to kind of play with the economies of Steam backed dollar. The difference is Steam didn't have much in the way of burning tokens. Like they didn't have a way to if there was less demand to correct a little bit. It sounds like you're addressing that with all these different avenues to burn tokens. And okay, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Well, and it's increasing the demand. I mean, unfortunately, Steam didn't have a lot of utility. I mean, you purchased Steam, and what it did was it gave you a higher vote.
Yeah.
What we're doing with Seeds is trying to make a true replacement to the US dollar by making it better to spend than the US dollar. So right now, if I handed you $20 out of my pocket, which I can't do, you're in California, but let's imagine I could, there's nothing I get out of it and there's nothing you get out of it. There's no fees. It's just there was an exchange that took place. But what we're trying to do with Seeds is make it better than even that. So that if I sent you some currency, there's no fees, but there's also some reward that I'm getting out of it. I'm building my account value through increasing my volume of transactions, which actually pays me more. So it's not that I'm making money necessarily by sending you money, but I'm increasing the account volume, which is going to get me more of that harvest. So we call it better than free because I'm actually earning money the more I use the token rather than paying more fees.
Okay, so yeah, so as you're active on the network, you're earning more of the harvest. And is the harvest essentially like your inflation rate?
Right. So the harvest is just what we call our inflation.
Okay.
Or even token creation, because if we're just replacing burned tokens, we're not actually inflating. We're just remaining stable. But anyway.
That makes sense. Okay, so that's why better than free, because as you're spending, you're going to be getting more of the inflation. And is there some sort of I saw it called universal earned income?
Earned income.
Is that how that works? Is you're earning your income through using the network and you're gaining part of the harvest?
Yeah. So we're trying to approach the you buy, because in our economy, everyone's earning part of this harvest.
Mm-hmm.
And you can earn it for planting, staking. We call it staking, planting, just trying to use ecological terms so people can wrap their heads around this whole process.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take some seeds and you plant them, then you increase your what we call contribution score. So that makes it bigger. Transacting makes it bigger, but also your reputation is a multiplier on those two factors. So the higher your reputation, the more you're going to earn as well. And you can earn reputation for participating in governance, passing proposals and following through with it, being active in the forum and getting upvotes. Very similar to Steam. We've pulled a lot of the stuff that Steam designed and put into Seeds. And having a good rating and things like that.
Okay. So you're going to have you have a reputation score plus your planting plus your kind of your activity within the ecosystem that gets you a part of this inflation. Would you have an idea of how much harvest, what percentage harvest people might look at if they're staking and participating in the community?
We have no idea, because it's going to depend on how fast we're growing, what our adoption looks like, how much you own relative to other people. I mean, there's too many factors at that to be able to give anyone a number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All we can say with certainty, it's going to be better than the US dollar.
It's not going to be, you're not going to be losing value 10 to 14%. That's good. Yeah. That's good. So it's a cooperative economy that incentivizes organizations to work together. How do you see that playing out? How does it, how are the organizations going to be incentivized, or what's that statement mean?
Yeah, awesome. So part of the harvest also goes to organizations through how much value their apps are either moving or providing to the society. So we have different metrics of tracking that. And this also, we can get really cool. But anyway, in simplified terms, the harvest is what these organizations are getting. So what they have now is an incentive to collectively grow the harvest, because the bigger the harvest is, the bigger their slice of the pie is as well. So yes, organizations are competing to get a bigger slice of the pie, but they're also cooperating to make the pie bigger.
Okay.
So if there's another organization who's in Seeds who's doing well, their success is your success, because they're growing the size of that pie. So your slice is actually going to get bigger. as they're helping grow it. So now there is that incentive to, share code, open markets together, and start collaborating a lot more ways than we have today, because you want them to succeed because you make more money.
Mm-hmm. So if if there's some killer DApp that is bringing in users, and you're getting a lot of transactions within seeds, basically that harvest is going to grow. So you're kind of rooting for that DApp to onboard people into the ecosystem.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Okay. And it says that also that devs can earn revenue without charging for their apps. Is that along those same lines about how that works, or how's that?
Exactly. So this can get really fun. So one example that I like sharing with what's possible within this financial system. Today with Apple, they make money when they sell products. That's their primary incentive. Sell goods and/or services and get paid for them. So now Apple has an incentive to make products that break down. It's called planned obsolescence, and it's why their phones don't really last more than a few years, and they try to get you to buy new ones. But we can do something different with this tech. We can say how many people are using Apple phones. And the more people who are using them, we're just going to keep paying you part of this harvest, part of our inflation, part of our societal wealth for providing goods and services to society. We can just reward you. So now Apple has a different incentive, not make products that'll break down so they can sell more of them, but make products that last a lot longer so that one person would use the same one over hopefully their entire life, because then they can earn more revenue off of a single product.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But anyway, so that's a complete shift in how our systems are so wasteful today, where we're creating things that essentially just are meant to break down and end up in a junkyard, where we can change it. But in our particular platform, another way that looks is how many people are using your app, your organization, how much money are you flowing through it? So let's say you're Amazon and you're moving a lot of US dollars through Amazon. What we are saying is you're adding a lot more to our economic activity. You're flowing a lot of value through our system. So we're going to pay you more of the harvest. So now, if you have a lot of people using your app, you don't have to charge fees, and you can still earn revenue through the harvest by people using your app.
Okay, so they're basically that those fees. I mean, they're being paid through the harvest. If they have a really popular app, then that harvest is going to be paying them, so they're not having to charge the user. It's coming out of essentially inflation of this growing system.
Right.
How's that work? How's that play out down the road? Let's say, like, if it were adopted to a level and it was being used and the system's not necessarily growing anymore. How does that inflation play out then?
Yeah, so that's a really cool question. If we ever grew to the point where we're not growing anymore, we've kind of reached critical mass adoption, and we've got 7 billion people or what have you using seeds. One, that's a really amazing situation to be in.
For sure.
Two, that's where the collective governance comes in. So our economy is meant to evolve, and when we get to those points, I mean, all along the way, I'm sure we're going to have a ton of different evolutions taking place as there's 7 billion people and their ideas coming together to evolve this. But once we get to that point, we could change to, say, a negative interest rate, so that there's just a demurrage is what it's called, and we're just creating more currency and fueling it. So essentially, just if you have currency, it goes down by X% and more money's made and it fuels it. And if that's happening on a whole systems level, I think that's a beautiful adaptation. But it's hard to bring into the beginning, because then it doesn't make it better than our current systems. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't step into a new currency that's losing value over time. But if that's the currency everyone's using, then it's no longer a problem. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different things that we can do at that level, but how we've designed it is kind of like how everything grows. There's different protocols at different stages of life. A baby has a different protocol inside the womb, as it does right when it's birthed into this world, up until it reaches adulthood. I mean, there's so many different life cycle transitions that any living organism needs to go through. And that's the same thing with seeds. All our protocols right now are designed for rapid growth and mass adoption. Once we have that, those protocols do need to evolve, but that's up to all of us to then decide how to evolve them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really cool way to put it. And I like that you've kind of based based everything on these natural systems. Even the protocols shifting is a cool analogy. So that's kind of down the road we talked about there. What about like in the very beginning? Where do you see seeds kind of the grassroots adoption? What's that look like, and what are the first steps?
Sure. So our go-to-market strategy is very similar to PayPal. What we're doing is we're approaching organizations who already have large communities and saying, would you like to accept payment without being charged fees and participating in new site cool names like, did I lose you? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So our go-to-market strategy is essentially the same as PayPal.
Mm-hmm.
We're approaching organizations and saying, hey, would you like to accept payments without being charged fees? And these organizations already have large communities, and we're just incentivizing them to get their community to pay them in seeds versus pay them in all the other traditional and existing ways. Because one, the more people pay them in seeds, one, they're not paying any fees up front, so it's already money that they're earning more revenue. Two, now they're also getting part of the harvest, the more people who use seeds. Also, organizations earn more of the harvest when they onboard people into seeds. So we're just lining a lot of incentives for organizations to bring their communities into it. So one of the ones that we have right now is Open Food Network. They operate in, I think, 17 different countries, if not more at the point. Essentially a farmer's market online and helping people deal with food peer-to-peer and direct. So our focus, who we're going to in the beginning, is organizations who are providing people with their basic needs. So food is a really big focus for us because for the common person, when they're talking about seeds and why should they accept it, we'd like the answer to be because you can buy dinner with it tonight. If you could buy food with this alternative currency, then it becomes much more usable and valuable, and you're more willing to accept it because that's a need you have 3 times a day, sometimes less or more, depending on the person. But the idea is we want to create that real use for it. So we're focusing on food as the underlying layer of how we're launching out. But yeah, our go-to-market is approaching organizations and getting them to bring their communities in.
You know, that the food thing is a killer idea, or even just this focus on a certain, I mean, food's a great example. It's something that people need. They're going to be spending money on a lot of the times every day. And in tying the adoption of a currency to a specific product or something like that's a great idea. I haven't really heard that before, but that makes sense because, you know, like even Bitcoin's a good example. Like people are like, well, you know, I don't know what to spend it on. Like, so it doesn't really become a currency because it's like, I don't know what to spend it on. I can't go to my neighbor or the farmer's market and buy something and eat right now with it. So it's like, there's not the main utility of having money is this ability to know where you're going to spend it and trust you're going to be able to spend it easily and trust that someone's going to accept it. And so what better place for that than food, like something that people need, that's a necessity. So that's a great thought on the intro there. So that, I forget what you said the name of the company was, but it sounds like farmers markets. Those are all over the place. And how many users and what level of like, dedication they have? Like, what's that look like?
Sure. So Open Food Network, that's one of the partners. I could talk a little bit more about them, but I also wanted to share more about why seeds was necessary for that food. Because that's actually rolling it back where seeds first came from is one of my friends down in New Zealand, his name's Michael Mail, he runs Cookie Time. He's also part of the core team, Haifa and seeds. But anyway, he wanted to have a peer-to-peer food platform where people are growing food out of their lawns, cooking food out of their houses, and selling it to their neighbors. This is a really cool idea, but it's an idea that's been tried and done before and failed. And a lot of the reasons why it's failed is I'm not going to pay Bob, my neighbor, to buy his pie and pay a fee on this platform that's charging me 10 or 3 or any percent really. I'll go over there, I'll be like, hey Bob, I hear you have pies for sale. How about I just hand you $10 and give me a pie? So the problem is that too many people are avoiding paying those fees, right? So that's really kind of the foundations of where we started ideating about seeds is how do we make using the platform better than paying in cash or using PayPal or any other way? So our first kind of new product that we're bringing to the market on top of seeds. It's called Light Food, and it's going to follow the flux that's happening in the States right now. California, where you're at, they just passed laws saying that you can cook food and sell it out of your house.
Oh,
this happened at the beginning of this year.
I didn't know that. That's fantastic. Okay.
Yeah, the beginning of this year, that's live. So now there's going to be an influx of platforms trying to tap into that. But why it's still slow is the business model is hard to identify, because that's exactly that. How are we going to charge fees and get people to use it without just, sending $5 to their neighbor?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what Light Food's about. It's that peer-to-peer food system dealing direct, but now it's actually better to use the platform because there's not fees. And as users and organizations, the more you're transacting, the higher your contribution score goes up, the more harvest you earn. So now it's better for you to use the platform and use seeds than it is to even hand them cash. Outside of all the other stuff that seeds is doing to make our world better and more livable, you just make more money. So
it's almost it almost sounds like it's gamifying like your farmers market shopping. It's like, okay, I could go to, and like you're saying, it's better than free. I could go to my farmers market or to my neighbor and I could pay him cash, but actually, like we can use a seed app, we're both going to be kind of almost earning some sort of UBI / universal earned income over time. So it's like, yeah, it's gamified. And that's what PayPal was like, such a simple concept, but their whole thing was like $10. You get a friend to sign up, you get $10, and it caused like this outrageous network effect where everyone was signing their friends up. So it's kind of cool, like just from a marketing standpoint, what makes stuff sticky. Gamifying farmers markets is a really rad take, especially because that's such a cool community too. I mean, people who are shopping at farmers markets are conscious of, these, what we talked about in the beginning of the show, kind of these problems with the base layer of some things we're doing to our planet. Like, if they not only is it gamified, but we feel like we're able to like be helping some sort of greater cause or some sort of like movement towards a better world, then that's a killer way to have it be sticky. I love that. Very cool. So what's the timeline look like as far as like that first utility or the first seeds rolling out and being able to be used?
Yeah, so September 15th, we're planning on having our alpha release of we call it a passport. So that's our mobile wallet where you can deal with governance and currency. It's basically everything PayPal can do, mixed in with a lot of features that LinkedIn has, mixed in with Fiverr, mixed in with the App Store and Amazon, mixed in with a new governance system. So that's we've got it all together. It's packaged, it's beautiful. A lot of the members of our core team, like what makes them awesome is their UI and their graphic design approach and how they make things beautiful. So that's really a primary focus of us, and how we're wanting to, give our gift to the world is by making it really beautiful. So that app will be alpha September 15th. We plan to launch with a beta of that November 5th, and that's when we start giving out currency. So we're only doing private sale for seeds for a lot of legal and regulatory reasons. But then for the vast majority of seeds, we are giving them out. So we're just doing airdrops and earn drops and different campaigns to just give people seeds. So we're not selling seeds to the big community, we're just giving them out. And how we plan on doing that is starting November 5th, we're going to be doing a bunch of different campaigns. One being like plant a seed, get a seed. Take a picture of yourself planting a garden or by a tree you just planted, we'll send you some seeds. Proof of food, that's prove that you're in the food system, we're going to give you a seed. Whether you cook food, sell food, make food, what is it? Transport food. Good deeds get seeds. So do a good deed, tell us about it, we're going to send you some seeds. So those are some of the campaigns we're going to push out and just start getting people who are doing good in the world and start encouraging doing good in the world, and we're going to be rewarding that. So that's also who we want our first community to be, are people who are doing that, thinking that way, because we're handing over the reins of governance to these people once it starts getting going. And we want people with that regenerative context or regenerative frame of mind to be able to lead this society, because that's what we're trying to build.
That's well, that's killer. And funny enough, like there was such a big homesteading scene on Steam. It's like there
Mm.
is this within, within like blockchain and crypto and the kind of thinkers and people that are in this space. There's also like a big contingent of them that are homesteaders. It's one of those like big big swaths of the community are homesteaders. So it's another killer little target market that aligns there a little bit for you guys.
It's kind of a natural evolution of that idea, right? I mean, if it's about freedom and personal ability to operate how you want, then it kind of makes sense to be completely interdependent or independent from the current systems. And that's homesteading. That's growing your own food, having your own house, making your own livelihood so you're not dependent on these systems. And when you start looking into how fragile our global systems are, then it just becomes very pragmatic to then make sure that you've got your own house and food taken care of, because supply chain disruption halfway around the globe can make it so people are starving in your part of the world. It's like, that doesn't make sense. So anyway.
Yeah, that's a really wild thought. That, I mean, homesteading is like this really fulfilling thing that's just part of like, just part of me being this like makes me happy. It's like something that I've found that's like makes me very fulfilled. But like on the pragmatic end, it also makes me feel like I'm actively doing something, because I live in California. Like it's like in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of an insane spot to live. Like, there's 6 million people like 30 minutes from my house, that if there's some sort of disruption in the food supply, like there would be huge problems instantly, and it's so anyway, the pragmatic thing is so true. It's like, yeah, I should probably just be growing more food than I've already am. But yeah, it's a pretty wild thought when you think of how fragile just the entire system that we're kind of propped up on right now, that feels like it will last forever. Nothing lasts forever. So hopefully it's a transition. I guess that's what you guys are trying to facilitate a little bit of us, like a transition into a peaceful transition into kind of a new paradigm here with seeds. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's that pragmatic sense that if we don't change our behavior, bad things could happen. But really, I see it as an invitation. Like, here's an opportunity for us to make something really beautiful. I mean, I think it would be much more beautiful to have gardens instead of lawns, to be able to convert a lot of our public parks into huge dripping food forests, where there's just go out there and you're picking fruit off the tree and bushes. I don't know why that doesn't already exist, but that's what Seed is going to try to finance and facilitate, is turning our empty spaces into food forests and growing lawns, not gardens, and making that very profitable and pragmatic for people to do.
Yeah, for sure. I was just listening to the coolest podcast. It was Graham Hancock. He's got a new book out, but he was talking about like the Amazon jungle and all that back in the day. And it looks like a lot of the Amazon was intentionally planted as like this outrageous food garden. Like all these like big swaths of trees and whole areas are all like, thousands and thousands of years ago, the Amazon was planted as like big parts of it were planted as for food. It's a food forest. So yeah, that's a killer idea. I mean, it's such a simple concept of planting trees and these fruits and ecosystems that take care of themselves and feed people, is like, what a simple concept, but we've gone like so far away from it, and it's cool to kind of think about stepping back in that direction a little bit. It makes a lot of sense, man.
Yeah.
So I saw another part of your guys' site that 12.5% of all the new seeds go to local and global grants to regenerate the planet. Is that down the road, or is there some sort of workable proposal system or grant system, or what's that look like?
Yeah, so that will be live at launch.
Oh, cool.
And what that looks like is, I can explain the harvest a little bit more. 30% goes, and these numbers can change and will change through governance, but at the beginning, 30% goes to all users in the form of a harvest. 20% goes to the organizations through that harvest. Another 20% goes to local bioregions. And what that means is we're actually putting physical boundaries, and these map over to what's called bioregions on our Earth. So if you type in bioregions in Google, you'll see that there's these physical boundaries on our Earth that represent different bioregions. And we're saying if you belong to one of those, that's your local community. So we're actually getting people to think in terms of their physical bioregions opposed to arbitrary borders or countries or cities or what have you. So when you join, you pick what bioregion you're a part of, and that makes up your local governance. So now there's money flowing to those local bioregions for them to be able to spend on local proposals. And that's where people can maybe ask for an interest-free loan to expand their business. They're saying, hey, I'm selling food out of my house or whatever. This is just an example. I'm selling food out of my house. My business is booming. You can see it. Everything's on chain. This is how much money I've been making the last 6 months. I'm looking to expand. And I'll just pay back that loan instantly by taking 5% of all my revenue to pay back a loan. It'll take, 5 months to do it, whatever. And then the local community is like, yeah, that's a really good idea. Let's use funds to do that. So they can do loans, they can collectively own assets. So Vermont has already passed it that their LLC can be paired to a DAO. So now that DAOs can physically own things in our world. I know that's an interesting idea anyway, but so now these local communities can say, hey, let's buy up that abandoned hotel, renovate it, and now we have a hotel that's free to access for all the citizens in our community. Or let's buy up a commercial kitchen, and now people can use that to be able to make food for the local community, or whatever. They can collectively buy and own assets. But 25% of the funds that are flowing to these local communities are reserved for grants to regenerative projects. So now people are saying, hey, I want to turn that abandoned lot into a food forest, or hey, I want to go and clean up the beach, and let's put on a party so that people can come, and I'm looking for a couple $100 to do that. Or let's replant that native forest, and I want trees and to pay for our labor, whatever. It's saying here is money to do the healing that we need to do that's not necessarily profitable.
Wow, that's really cool. That's very cool. So you mentioned bioregions. Can you give like an example of like a couple bioregions that there are? Like, is that by weather or climate, or how's that?
It's kind of by climate. I think the best example, since it's a little bit complex, is just type it into Google, look it up. It'll show how these things are set up.
Yeah.
But typically it comes with their own watershed. So this is like the source of water where it's coming from. So it encompasses that, which I also think is really important when we're looking at a regenerative side, is if we say we're only dealing with one part of it, which is downstream, and that's all we're taking care of, well, we can't actually heal the whole water source unless we have the entire thing to take care of. So that's another reason why bioregions make sense, because then you can go to the source of the problem and start healing it from there out, opposed to, just trying to clean up the ears at the bottom. So yeah, bioregions typically encompass their own watersheds and their own growing regions and growing conditions. So now like proposals typically have the same feel to them because it makes sense to do certain healing in temperate climates than it does in tropical, etc.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cool. So how big are these bioregions, big as countries, or are they big as like?
Some countries, sure.
Okay.
So bioregions can be pretty big, and for that, and just for human size, we do plan on fractaling out into different sizes because watersheds could sometimes be smaller. But either way, there's a lot of different biological and physical boundaries that we can fractal into as we start growing. But just for simplicity, we're starting with bioregions and then letting it fractal smaller as the need arises.
Okay, yeah, and that makes sense too. For as you kind of scale, you can fractal into more reasonable governance type of thing.
Right.
Okay, very cool. You also mentioned briefly DAOs can be owned by LLCs, or you mentioned something like that. What state was that? I haven't heard about that.
So Vermont, yes. So if you type in Vermont LLC DAO, and also it looks like Wyoming's doing this. A couple of countries are getting on board. So essentially that you can have the constitution of an LLC be run by DAO governance.
Very cool. Man.
So that you can set up an LLC, legal entity, have it run by the DAO, and now you're collectively owning assets and using a DAO to facilitate it. And I think that's really rad because that moves into this concept of collective ownership of our regions and even collective ownership of our countries, nation states, everything that we're growing as a collective, so that we have access to these things rather than individual ownership. Because that's really what people want and need, is access to goods and services and things that make their life beautiful. We don't necessarily need to own them individually. It could also make it so we're stepping into much more wealth. I mean, there's so much stuff that we have that we rarely use. And if there's a good way of collectively owning these assets, it makes way more sense.
Yeah. This is one of the first times in recent human history that we've had this chance to look at how we govern ourselves and try to come up with a model that makes sense for these giant human communities. The systems that we're governing ourselves on now are made for, just the bottom line, they're made for like smaller groups of people. And we've scaled them to like, okay, we're using the same way that we govern like, a little town of 100 people, now we're governing like, 600 million people that way. And it's just like, it's hard to, we didn't have a chance to figure that out in the last couple thousand years, how to do it right. And like, it's just crazy to think like we're in this time where we're rethinking the way to govern ourselves as humans. And you guys are rethinking a way to like, try to turn this whole thing around, and it's such a big idea. Sometimes it like just trips me out how big of an idea that is, and it's exciting to hear stuff like this, man.
Absolutely. I like saying we're kind of in the modern Renaissance because it's not necessarily a revolution. Because a revolution is an overthrowing of one power into another power. And I mean, we look at a representative, Chris, that might have made sense back when you had to hop on a horse, ride for 3 to go to a coliseum to raise your hand and yell and try to be heard. Like, it didn't make sense. So you sent Tom. He was your neighbor. Sent him to go and vote for you.
Yeah.
If Tom doesn't vote the way you want, there's that immediate feedback because Tom comes back to your small village and there could be some repercussions for Tom, direct, that will impact him if he didn't vote the way you guys wanted to him at the Coliseum.
Yeah.
So we had those feedback systems back when these representative democracies first came alive. So almost made sense then. Today it doesn't because we can vote directly online, immutably, transparently. Like we don't need someone to represent us anymore. So our entire governing systems are built on this idea that you need representation, but we don't. We can vote directly. So what Seeds is doing is we're creating something called voice tokens. We were thinking of this before voice, but anyway, we think it's great. So by the way, we have these voice tokens that we give out for governance. And it's fairly proportional to what you're getting in the harvest. You're putting some of your tokens on one. Those are less tokens that you get to put on another and then vote on them. And then you can also put more tokens on one to better represent your opinion on that or less on another. So it gets rid of that mob rule or that ability for people who are informed to be able to govern things that they don't actually know about because they're lost and not voting. You can tokenize our voice in that way. It gets rid of mob rule, it gets rid of minorities being abused by the majority because now the minority can then, vote higher on different proposals that they're about, etc.
If we're doing one user, one account type of voting and Seeds governance specifically, so is it stake weighted? Like the more tokens that you own, the more votes you have, or does everyone get, let's say, 10 votes? How's that work?
Sure. So the same as with the harvest, that users have what's called a contribution score. And the more they're contributing, the more the seeds they get. And the same is true for voice. The more you're contributing to seeds, the more voice that you have. And that contribution's, again, made up by how much tokens you have staked, what your reputation is, and how much you're actually contributing to the ecosystem through use. Why this is, I think, really essential is because why Telos was essential to fork away from EOS is because they gave governance through token ownership. And that's essentially what we call plutocracy, governance by the wealthy. And then they were able to make self-serving decisions like get rid of the worker proposal system that didn't actually serve the system as a whole or the people as a whole, but that just served the interests of a small group of very wealthy people. So we needed to move away from I own a token, I get a voice, because then that just lets us open for people to be able to buy their way through governance. So yeah, our voice is distributed proportional to your contribution score, and you can earn that through a number of ways.
And is Seeds going to be a one user, one account type of system? Is that on the roadmap or?
We encourage that, and we certainly can't enforce that, but we encourage it through the reputation side. So all accounts start with negative reputation until you earn some. Mm-hmm. So, and you have to contribute either time or intelligence or identity in order to earn that reputation. So either one of those is going to slow down the process of creating proxy accounts and limit that from happening.
Okay, so there's there's a barrier to getting your reputation up. So,
Right.
Okay, so
and if you have a negative reputation, it's pulling down the rewards you would have got through the stake for the transaction volume. So then that's why the incentive to create one account, build up that rep with one account, makes way more sense than it does to create a bunch of fake ones.
Okay, because you're pulling down the value of all your other accounts if you create a bot army basically with low reputations. Okay,
right.
Very cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about your roadmap. As we kind of come towards the end here, but we've got the wallet, which is coming, and then it looks like on the roadmap is a LinkedIn style kind of interface, and a forum and a marketplace. What you want to explain what those are individually, how they kind of fit together?
I'll kind of look at my phone and go through the app, but you guys might not be able to.
Oh, cool. Yeah, you can see it. Yeah. Well, that's beautiful.
Show it to you. Let me kind of walk you through this process. So I actually want to show this part because this is pretty cool. So here's your wallet. And everything I was talking about before is here. So you see your harvest. Let me go to an account that has a big harvest right now. So you see your potential harvest. So I'll be like logging into PayPal and being able to see all the money that you've just earned for participating. Mm-hmm. How many seeds you have planted, your visitor status, and your contribution score. So this is what I was kind of sharing before. So you come over here and you see what your contribution score and the different metrics that make it up. But we do have this section called people. So this is what we call like the LinkedIn for regenerators, or just a place where you go to connect with other like-minded people, do projects together, and find all the other people that make up your community. So here you can put in the different dimensions of the people you're looking for. So you're paired with people that match your interests. And then it shows them to you. You'll be able to connect through them. So we're using Signal. That's the open source peer-to-peer messaging app that's all encrypted. So you'll be able to communicate with people through this app. So this is what we were talking about, being a minimal viable society where we have these different tools. So one of them is being able to connect with the different people in it. Second is the market. So this is very modeled after the App Store. So this is going to show all the different organizations, apps, etc., that use seeds. So this is where you'll be able to go to find all the different places where you can spend seeds. But also it's kind of built after Fiverr, where all the different people will be able to put up their own particular offerings. So then you can come through here and search all the different offerings that people have. So this is Fiverr without the fees and an App Store. Then you have the forum. So this is where all the discussion is taking place. So this is kind of like Steam, where people are coming here, they're engaging in governance, they're discussing ideas, and they're earning reputation, which is then earning the money through doing so.
Okay.
So if you're getting upvotes, if you're coming out with good comments, etc., this is where you do that at, and this is where you get rewarded. And then finally is we call it co-op so that people can understand it, but this is the different layers of DAOs that we offer in Seeds. So this is an example of a local one. So you see all the different proposals that are up. You see the different voice tokens cast on for and against. You can hop in, you can see the details of it. You can throw your vote, yay or nay. And yeah, so this is where governance takes place. And then there's the different layers, as I was explaining. So you have the local governance, and then you have the global side. And then we're also calling what we have a DAO nursery. So this is being able to come in here and spin up your own DAOs. So where there's a physical number, there's only one DAS is what we call it, Decentralized Autonomous Society. And there's one for Seeds as a whole. But then we have DACs, Decentralized Autonomous Communities, and those are the local bioregions. So there's also a physical number of those. What we call DAOs is also organizations, and there can be an infinite number of those. So all three of those different amounts you can access through the Seeds app.
Okay. And can you launch a DAO or a DAC onto the Seeds app there? You
can't launch a DAC because, again, those are already launched at Go, and they might fractal out, but that's something that's happening at the base level. But you can launch DAOs.
Very cool.
So again, this is our terminology. I know the terminology is all very new. We're just using all of it. But yeah, we're calling what's called a DAO nursery, and we're building out a bunch of different tools. We're already doing it for our DAO. So HIFA, which is the core team behind Seeds, we're operating through a DAO, and it's a holacracy inspired DAO for those of you who know holacracy. But I can give a link to our DAO and you can check it out and see what we're doing with that. These are different tools that we're building to help people set up DAOs and make governance a very simple and beautiful reality.
That's killer. So what's a holacracy? I haven't heard that term.
So holacracy is just a governance framework. One of the beautiful parts and simplicities of a holacracy is the notion that the role is not the soul. So it takes an organization and creates roles for it rather than thinking of people getting together and what they could do. So it says this organization needs these roles, and then it has these roles that are open that other people can fill. Maybe multiple people can fill a role, or one person can fill multiple roles, or whatever it's set up. So what we've done is we set up our organizations. We say these are the number of roles that we need for this organization to thrive. And then we let people apply to those roles. And multiple people can apply to one, you can apply to multiple, what have you. And then these roles have certain accountabilities. So maybe your role is media. And in that role, you're meant to put out, 15 posts and 5 articles and connect with a certain number of people. So that's what you're accountable to. And then you have a domain of operations. So your domain might be the blog. So that's all put up in your description of that role. And then that comes with a salary. So you can apply to fill that role, and the current existing people within that DAO can vote up or down saying, yes, you can have that role. And if you get it, then through one cycle, at the end of that cycle, in ours, it's 28 days. So after 28 days, you say, okay, I filled this role. And then everyone goes, yes, you did fill that role, or no, you didn't. And if the community says, yes, you filled that role, you get paid.
Very
so
cool.
This way, it's kind of moving past just, I did X, pay me Y. Now people can actually fill roles and kind of be an employee, so to speak, in a way, of an organization, have a way of working without our current proposal system.
And how far along you're launching the alpha September 15th and the beta November 5th? How much of the wallet, that the social media site, the forum, the marketplace, how much of that's fully functioning, or how much of that's going to be launched at alpha?
Yeah, so actually today, everything in our wallet side is done, and that's already on the Telos mainnet. That's actually where we're testing it. It's cheaper to do that and better than, anyway.
Cool.
So yeah, the wallet side, that's already taken care of. What we're waiting to do for that September 15th launch is take care of all the forum side. So that's where people are getting rewarded and gaining their reps. So that's what we're working on now till September. And the governance side, the DAO side, a lot of that's already taken care of too. So we're pretty much there, but come September 15th, we're planning on having all of that basic functionality working. And that's where we're going to push it out. We're going to test it. And obviously there's going to be some flaws, and that's what we're going to try to fix before the November 5th. And that's when we're saying, okay, here's the beta app. We're launching it. Now we're coming out with a token. But when we launch at November 5th, we're not actually going live with the economic protocols that I've talked about. So November 5th, we're launching a token that we call pre-seeds. These are that token that exists before seeds. And yeah, so organizations are going to be shown here, but the API we're giving organizations to accept payments won't be turned on. So that there's not very many places to spend seeds at that time. And our harvest isn't working either. So we have a fixed supply of tokens. There's no harvest. There's no DAO governance taking place. The forum's active. People can build rep, but that's really all that's happening at that time. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. So what we're waiting from November 5th then is to wait until there's an X number of organizations and people actually on board, because we want to get a critical mass going before we actually press play and go live. So we're actually looking for a growth curve too. We're hitting a certain growth trajectory. And once we get on that, then we press play so we can run with that growth trajectory and start rapidly getting that adoption. Yeah.
Fantastic.
And that might be June, July next year. Who knows?
And how long, you said you've been working on this for a long time. How long have you been working on the seeds, this project for?
3 years, coming on 3 years.
And what was the initial thought? 3 years is before EOS or Telos was around. What was the initial thought for the launch of Seed?
We didn't necessarily know. A lot of it was modeled after what was possible with BitShares and Steam.
Okay.
So I was still active in Steam at that time, and that was a lot of inspiration. And then there's still talk that EOS was coming out then. So, and what was proposed to be possible with EOS was necessary for seeds. I mean, the fee-free transactions, the rate limiting, all that. I mean, that's still in discussion at that point. So that's why we had always known we were going with EOS.io, because it just made sense the way that our platform was designed. But I mean, it started getting a little bit iffy about a year and a half ago, and the holochain was coming out. The community shared a lot of our ethics and vision for the world. A couple of the core team on us was like, yo, what about holochain? Should we move to them? And so we start building on Holo, what yada. I'm like, so we're really happy that Telos came around, because EOS didn't necessarily have the best reputation or feel for a lot of the community that we're trying to connect with. So that's another really beautiful thing about Telos, is it does have that ethical grounding and then trying to do good for the world. Reputation. And we really appreciated that. And that helped convince some of our community members that, okay, we're not supporting EOS, we're supporting Telos. We're just using a better technology that's designed for our needs. That's
cool. That's really cool to hear. That's a cool origin story. It's interesting that, like, how long you've been around and working in this DPoS, since BitShares and Steam and now over to here. So very cool. Very cool. So we covered where you're at, kind of where you're going, what the big picture is. Is there any things that you'd like to hit on or cover as we do the last few minutes here?
Well, I think we've covered quite a bit. We do have an open call. I mean, like I said, we have our DAO open. We're going live with it within the next 11, 12 days. So that'll actually be available for people to come to, present themselves with different roles that they want to fill. So I guess what I'm saying with this is we're open. We want other people to get involved and help build this. We're not a very closed team. Our concept and our intention here is to create a new society. In order for us to actually do that, we need to be very open and inclusive of who can participate in this process and get rewarded for doing so. So we're absolutely open for other people joining in this development process, figuring out different ways they can plug in and add value and get rewarded for adding that value. And we would love to see people start showing up and helping this grow faster in a more beautiful way. Yeah. Very cool. Where can people find you? What's the best places to find you or hook up or help out on the socials? Sure. So right now, just joinseeds.com is great. If you type Join Seeds into Telegram, you're going to find us. All of our social medias is just whatever it is, /Join Seeds. So it's Join Seeds across the board, wherever you find us. So we're on Medium. We just set up a Twitter. That's the thing. None of our core team right now really cares about doing the social media stuff, which is why you've never really heard about us. We've just been more interested in building. So we just now transitioned into that. So if anyone listening to this just loves doing social media outreach and managing those platforms and gets this vision and understands this tech, we're looking for that role. So, I mean, if you find us on any of our socials, we're pretty dead. We haven't done much there. Medium, cool. We're starting to dig in on, so you can find us there. Well, it's it's actually kind of good to be dead until you on socials until you have like a really killer product. Which by the by your demonstration that you showed on your phone, I mean you guys have been head down working on some really cool stuff. That's an exciting demo you gave. So so time for people to start looking into it and becoming part of the community coming up. That's something else. Like two of our core guys, one of them runs an animation studio. It's won just a Cannes Lion. It's one of the most prestigious animation awards you can get. They're like Pixar quality. So they're coming in here to do a lot of our animations and our graphics work. So it'll be super gorgeous on that front. The other side, who's doing the UI, he's won Webby Design Award for user interface and design. So also very beautiful. So that's a primary purpose of us. Is I think what's missing in the blockchain decentralized space is beauty and elegance and simplicity of use. So that's something that we're really focusing on bringing into our alpha and beta launches, making it really, really beautiful. Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate your time today, Rieki. This was fun. It's cool to get this info out to people because, like you said, you guys have been kind of in stealth mode, and so it's an honor to get to hear the story and put it out there to a lot of the community. For people listening, this is the Telos Podcast, and you can find me on Telegram. And if you have anyone really interesting you want to send on the show, send them to hit me up on Telegram, and that's about it. So it was rad to have you on, Rieki. Any final words, or you want to say goodbye to the audience there? Let's keep going. Build a better future. Yeah.
Let's build a better future. I like it.
Brandon.
Yeah, cheers, brother.
The money is not the prime asset in life. Time is.